This is my third time recording this, so hopefully the volume will work and it will save right and all that good stuff. So, this is our disciplinary literacy review. I chose two resources, and I chose to use Screencast-O-Matic because it's kind of easier for me to just talk about it versus write about it. I chose one for professional growth and one for classroom use, just because without one, I don't think I would be able to do the other. So the first one that I chose is this module. I had Miss Wilson for disciplinary literacy last semester in my undergrad. So it wasn't until I'm one of those people that keeps all my notes and all that good stuff. So it wasn't until she gave me this PDF last semester that I was able to truly understand and grasp what disciplinary literacy was. So I felt like I could not do this assignment without posting this graphic. So it talks about thinking like a literary critic, thinking like a scientist, thinking like a historian, thinking like a mathematician. It goes along with ask compelling questions, gather and analyze sources, creatively synthesize claims and evidences, critically evaluate and revise, share, public, and act. So it wasn't until I truly dove into this and learned that I was able to know truly what being a disciplinary, like thinking like a historian, thinking like a scientist. I understood what that meant, but it did never grasp me about disciplinary literacy until this. So I chose this one for professional growth, and I think it's very important. I think if all educators were able to see this, then it would make more sense to them. And then I also chose one for classroom use. So the Common Core Success Academy, when I took Miss Wilson's class, there was one lesson that stuck out to me the most. We did a ton of lessons, but there was one lesson in particular that I keep all my binders, as I said a minute ago, but I didn't have to go back and look. I still remembered every single aspect of that lesson. So I decided when I was going to do one that it would model sort of that lesson, because that's what I learned the best with last semester. So I went to the Common Core Success Academy, and after doing lots of digging through and lots of lessons, I found this one that was reading and writing like a scientist. So in this lesson, each one's like 32 pages, so I'm not going to go through all of it with you, but in this lesson, they observed nature and they conducted research, as it says up there, and then they had to create a field journal entry. And I knew what a field journal entry was, but I didn't know every single aspect that had to go. It's like a sequential order. Something has to happen for another something to happen. So I didn't know all of that had to go through. So they were not only having to use their scientific skills, but they were also having to use their literacy skills. And I like seeing that those disciplines were interacting, but they were also thinking like a discipline in their discipline. So if you keep on going down, there's big ideas and guiding questions and content connection. But then down here, you get to lessons. There are a ton of lessons. So the main two, when I was doing my research, I focused on were how to write like a scientist in the field and how to observe closely and record. So the first lesson, I do have it pulled up. It's 16 pages, so I won't go through it. But as you can see, it has like all the targets and all the learning targets, and then the agendas and just all that good stuff. It's really great. So there's that. So I didn't know personally every single thing that went into a field journal, every aspect of a field journal. So it was very eye-opening to me. And then the next one is how to create a field journal. So basically they go record all this stuff and then they have to write a field journal. So not only are they thinking like a scientist, but then they're writing like a scientist. In the end, they have to swap journals with a couple people. So they're reading like a scientist, and I loved that so much about this lesson. So that's why I chose this one. I did answer those two. I did answer the questions that she wanted. I put it in PowerPoint format, so it would be easier for me to just flip through them. So the first question was, what process did you use to find your resource? Be specific. So as I said earlier, I took Miss Wilson's class, so to find the first document, it's one that she'd actually given me. So I just went back to my binder and I looked where it came from, and I found it. And I had already, when she gave it to me, I went and printed it out in color because I loved it so much. So I already had it. So it's from my notes from last semester. with each class, I make like a resource list. So out of all the resources that she gave me all semester long, I had that on there. I've always used the Common Core Success Academy, so I just made sure that I was very thorough in my research on the website that I chose. So it was fairly easy, which answers the next question. Was it easy to find a resource or difficult? It was easy for me because I do the extra work in all my undergrads, keeping my notes and doing those resource pages and everything. So it was very easy for me to find this, and I enjoyed opening that back up and looking through it. I learned so much during the disciplinary literacy process. So the third question you asked was, what did you discover about the disciplinary literacy during the process? So I learned that whether you're thinking like a historian, or you're thinking like a scientist, or you're thinking like a mathematician, or even a musician, if you're thinking like it, there are hundreds of thousands of ways for you to approach it. I would have never thought to have my students write a field journal. That's not something I would have ever thought of. But since I discovered that lesson and I had to learn what went into writing a field journal, we both were having the opportunity, me and my students, to think like a scientist. And I enjoyed that so much. So I learned no matter what you think, there are also thousands of other ways to approach it. So I kind of like the saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. That's basically, there's so many ways, and there's so many ways to intertwine different disciplines, literacy with science and history with English and all that good stuff. The next question was, why did you choose your resource specifically? I mentioned earlier that there was one lesson that stuck out to me the most, and this was it. We did a history lesson with Miss Wilson's class, and it was kind of almost just like this, and I loved it so much, and it stuck with me, and I could remember almost every detail without having to open that back up. So that's why I chose that, because things rarely stick with me the way that they did, and that one did. I chose did you choose it for professional growth or classroom use? The first one I definitely chose for professional growth. As I mentioned, it was so hard for me to totally grasp what disciplinary literacy was until I had that document. So I think it is so important for educators that are struggling with disciplinary literacy to see that. The second one was definitely for classroom use. But I had learned so much by choosing that one, so it's research-based because it's from the Common Core Success Academy. There are so many lesson plans by so many people, so many resources, and I think it's such a great tool for every educator or future educator or so on and so forth to use because it is so helpful. Would this resource need to be modified for your use? I think whatever you're doing, whatever content you're covering, there's a way to adapt the field journals to it. So I don't think modifications in that sense is needed, but I do want to get my master's in special education. That's my next master's degree. So for my students, it might be hard to do all that writing, but they could draw a picture or act it out in some sense. So I would maybe need to modify it if I was teaching my special needs students. But that's all I could think of in the needs and modifications. I hope this makes so much sense and that there's a better grasp on disciplinary literacy and so on and so forth. Thank you.